Hi everyone, I'm Yashvir, and welcome to our audio channel, The Bro Code. So what's this channel about? The name suggests it's about your typical bro code, rules followed by guys, right? But this runs deeper than that. I guess we wanted to discuss how we have grown through life and how various situations have shaped us. By the means of the podcast on this channel, we hope to say something meaningful and impactful that perhaps you can use in yours. So please join us in this inspiring journey. We hope it helps you in some way.
Hi, everyone, and welcome again to another podcast episode. So, some trying times here in South Africa, fighting COVID on one front and the plight of the people erupting on the other. What truly showed, I guess, after the turmoil has been this, after this tumultuous wreck, is the unity and the resolve to actually find a way forward. So, that has been just a quick catch up on what's been happening in SA currently. And this week, though, we have a new guest in on the show. We have Dean with us today. So let's start with you quickly, Dean. So just give us a brief about who you are and what's up in your life currently.
Who I am, that's an interesting question. Still not sure about that, to be perfectly honest. Been friends with you guys for quite a while, but I work in advertising. Grew up in Tongaat, spent a couple of years overseas trying to figure that out as the who I am question. Didn't really come right. Came back and got into advertising. Yeah, I don't know if that's what you're looking for. If you want
That
more
was
detail.
perfect. So how have you been this far?
Been good. Recently recovered from COVID, so that was interesting. I didn't even know I had it. I actually had to get a pre-admission test done, and that's how I found out. And then picked up symptoms a couple of days later. And then now I think I'm pretty much fully recovered. So besides the COVID, obviously you'd be talking about the unrest in South Africa. We've all got family around the country. Like all three of us have family in Durban, and we were quite concerned about them there because that's where a lot of the unrest actually was. So there was a few sleepless nights. Seeing communities band together was quite encouraging, but there's obviously good sides and bad sides to that. But yeah, thankfully it's touch wood stabilized a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I can definitely relate to. I guess we all can relate to just the family aspect and safety aspect. Of loved ones down there. And as usual, we have our resident guest, which is Prash. How are you, Prash?
Good in yourself.
Fantastic, man.
Nice to have Dean in the chat now.
Yeah, a third person to kind of face the brunt of some questions that we.
I'm actually here because I wanted a front row ticket to this thing because you guys were taking so long to release episodes.
Well, I guess this is one way to be, to get the thing to get the
content
firsthand,
early.
right? The content, yeah.
It's like nice
to be a part of it. Yeah, join the party. Yeah, 100% that. So I guess today's topic is an interesting one. And I guess I chose it because we have this wide social circle, and there's so many facets to it, and some of those we'll be covering. We'll be covering a bit more of that in detail right now. So I guess let's start off by asking what specifically it is, and how important is it in our lives? So what is a social circle, and how important is it in our lives going forward?
I can go, I suppose. First, if you like. So as Dean says, he's known us for quite some time, right? So for me, you see how the dynamic comes in when you have multiple people in your life, right, that are sort of on the same wavelength or level in different areas of your life. So social circle for me is where you have a group of people that are basically have a common trait, theme, interest, a common item between them that they all can link up on, right? And most people have multiple different social circles in their life, right? Where there's like family social circles, right? Because you have cousins and you have second cousins and things like that. You band together with some of them, but you also don't like some of them. So there's that. But there's also other social circles where you have friends on different levels. So someone could have social circles with friends that like specific sports, right? And then you have a different set of friends that like specific activities. Like some people like hiking, but some of their other friends don't like hiking, so they go and do other activities with their other friends. So you have multiple different social circles. But how it impacts you is that depending on who you're with, you can change, or that person sometimes may change aspects of themselves depending on the social circle that they're in. And everybody's watched those movies where this kid hangs out with the in crowd and then they become that type of person, and then their old friend doesn't like them anymore. We've all seen those movies, right? But that's what social
Yeah.
circles do to you, right? They change certain parts of you, or they can have that effect on you. Not necessarily they do, but they can have that effect on you. And I'd say for me, having a social circle is very important because you want the things that you like to grow around you to be around you, and you want people in those environments to be around you as well, because it's always nice to have something or someone to bounce things off. I
Yeah,
think it's very
I would agree with
important.
that.
And that's how I view social circles. Most people have multiple. Some people have one or two, and they always say it's good to keep your social circle or your circle small, right? Because obviously, the more people you hang out with, the more it dilutes your time and stuff like that. But I mean, everybody's different, and everybody likes different things. So yeah,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if I can chip in there, um, when you were talking about how sort of people become like their group, it's very much a case of you take on the properties of that social
yeah,
circle as part of assimilation and fitting in with them. And different social media influencers over time have come out and said the biggest life hack is you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So I think in terms of when you look at your social circle and you want to see how you're progressing in life, you look at those 5 people, or it could even be 10 people. But the people you spend the most time with, those are the characteristics that you will pick up most often and emulate most often, because that's how you've fitted into that group.
yeah. No, I agree. It's definitely a thing. I think there's studies done on the stuff to show that, like, the more you hang out with a certain type of person, the more you pick up those traits. And there's
Yeah,
so many of the successful people say, keep don't let the people that are around you be, say for example, you wanted to improve in wealth or business mindedness or things like that. They always say be with people that are more successful than yourself, because you naturally rise to that level. Whereas if you're the big fish in the small pond, you'll never really grow. So it has
yeah.
that sort of element in that discussion where you sort of pick up the traits of the people around you. Um, so that definitely what you're saying there is like a really really big thread of social circles.
I think the other thing, sorry, Ash, I know you're about to say something, and I might just be taking us on a tangent here. Um, but in terms of social circles, how often do you see people not necessarily showing their real self because of the need to fit in and therefore changing? It's like how much do you lose of yourself in the social circle for the need to fit in? Because we are by nature individuals or beings that require community. We're communal creatures. We
Mm,
require a
mm,
group of people in order to survive.
yeah.
I know it's something that was hardwired in us. I don't know how many years ago when we were still running from wild animals,
Mm.
but being in a tribe or a group meant survival, and that's kind of how we seem to take to social circles. Like if we don't fit in, we won't survive, and how much of us get lost in that process.
So definitely that is something that's a big factor in social circles, and that's why when I say you have people that have multiple social circles, it's because they
Yeah,
can't share some part of themselves with one circle and they can't share another part of themselves with another circle. So to get
yeah,
that feed from one, so say for example you like two different things, right? So
mm.
I like pizza and I like gaming, right? But if I love pizza and I love gaming, and half my friends don't like gaming, but the other half don't like pizza, okay, I don't understand why someone would like pizza, but
Shouldn't trust those people.
yeah, you shouldn't. But like imagine now, like when I'm playing games and stuff, and I'm having a pizza, right? Some people are just gonna be like, "Ew, what are you doing?" You know, it's sort of you sort of have to. Um, People tend to hide a certain part of themselves when they are with certain people, and hide another part of themselves when they're with other people. You know, and I think Yash and I discussed this before, where you know if you picture yourself as a silhouette, right, and if you're with certain people, you're only showing those people a certain part of your silhouette, whereas if you're with other people, you're only showing them a different part of that. And how much you show of yourself to different people automatically becomes something where, am I being holistically myself? Am I being true to myself all the time? And that is something that, like, when we talk about that, right, it becomes a big part of, do you now question whether certain parts of your social circles need to actually be a part of your life? Because you do you want to only have certain social circles where you only do that one thing, right? And then it's fine
Yeah.
that you don't show the rest of yourself? Or do you want to be yourself all the time, and if people don't accept it, then they just don't accept it, you know? Because you
Yeah.
can't really make other people like certain parts about yourself, but if they don't like it, I mean, you can't really force them to, you know what I'm saying? So
It does talk
yeah,
very much into that whole fear of acceptance thing.
yeah.
You're talking about the silhouettes now. What is the name of the podcast you guys discussed it on? Just for people that want to go back and if they haven't come across it yet. Do you
Look,
have it on hand?
I don't even remember if we did discuss it on a podcast, Yash, but
We did discuss the you know the silhouettes, the
Yeah.
different facets. It's like you know where you're saying,
yeah,
it's a painting and you paint yourself. So there's different layers of yourself.
yes, yeah,
I think that was episode 2, if I'm not mistaken.
sure.
Yeah, if people want to
I-
go back and listen.
I think maybe we can just include that. We can maybe
Yeah,
include
we'll
that
we'll
after
include the
chat or
note. We'll
something,
include a
yeah.
note.
I'll
If
include the
you
note.
have-
But yeah, it's a good question, Dean, because that whole, you know what, social circles for me is whenever I hear the word social circle, I always think of like circles of acceptance, you know,
Yes.
and that's where that whole thing stems from. Because if I have 3 circles in front of me and it's got 3 different sets of people, every time I walk into one of those circles, right, I'm going to have to then understand that there's certain levels of acceptance that are part of the circle, right? And it's not the same for the other circles, right? Because if you're
Yeah.
with close friends like we are, right, I mean, more or less whatever I say is going to be accepted, right? But if I go and say the same things in other circles, people are going to look at you funny, right? And you
Yeah,
have to
no, that's
decide,
true.
yeah, you have to decide for yourself whether that's something that you want to accept about yourself, right? But
Yeah.
it's a really good question. And your question, I wouldn't say is a tangent, because for me that's essentially one of the quintessential questions about social environments and circles. Like, because it underpins so much about how people react and change, right? But how they perceive themselves as well, and that's a big one.
Yeah, I mean, like where my mind is going right now is it's a struggle for self here because there's
Yeah.
self-preservation within the group, but then preserving the true self within. And there's a struggle between the two because if you in your social circle, you need that acceptance, because you want to feel part of something and you want to feel part of a community, but then you're compromising who you are as a person, and that's an opportunity cost, and it's a big one that you're losing on yourself versus, just being a part of something.
But
Yeah.
I think I've said in the past, on one of the podcasts, though, if you are betraying yourself in order to just fit in and things like that, then what you're trying to fit into doesn't belong in your life.
Okay.
You should never ever betray yourself just because you want to feel some sort of I don't know, social acceptance. Betraying yourself is actually very, very, it's an important thing, I guess. So
No,
leading from
I
stability
yeah,
and
I agree with that holistically, right? And I agree with that fully. But some people don't notice that they're betraying themselves. You know what I
That's
mean?
true, but I also
Yeah.
think that some people do it knowing full well that they're betraying themselves
Yeah.
because they're afraid of being alone,
Yeah.
or they're afraid of not having a social circle. But that social acceptance, you have to have a certain level of introspection to even begin this discussion with yourself, and B, if you're going to go about this, a lot of people won't necessarily want to give up the comfort of having a social circle and people in their lives, and that social acceptance is such a big deal. But this is the best time ever in the history of humanity to be an individual, because you don't live in a village and there's jungle, and then if you're not part of something you might die.
Mm.
You know, the whole world is a village now. Like, there are people that have the same sets of interests and same set of like mindset as you all around the world, and you can find a community 10 k's down the road, kilometers down the road, or you can find a community in Canada or wherever it is. But you can find people that have the same sort of energy and wavelength as you do. You know,
Yeah.
you're not going to be alone anymore.
Yeah, for sure. I think because, as you say, everything is going online now. I mean, everything is just as close, if not closer, than it used to be. You know?
Including access. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, access
yeah,
to
for sure.
people has never been as broad as it's been right now.
But speaking about that, I think when we first went into this whole lockdown thing, I think I was telling you that this is probably the ideal time for everybody to find out about themselves.
Yeah, you did.
You
Yeah, and
know,
it was 100% right.
pull away from the social circle, right? And actually spend time learning about all the things that you like. Because then when you go back into those social circles, all of a sudden you're now a different person and you view things differently. And you also, as Yash clearly pointed out, you can decide for yourself what it is that you're betraying yourself on and what you're not betraying yourself on. And then you can decide for yourself whether previous social circles that you had are still something that you want now, you know?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
100% right. Like, so
Yeah.
many people are more conscious of themselves and what they actually enjoy, and they're conscious of the things that they didn't enjoy.
Yeah.
And they're not as willing to compromise anymore, because like this, what this lockdown forced us to do was it forced us to spend time with ourselves
Mm.
and to face ourselves,
Mm.
which is a harder thing than a lot of people realize.
Definitely.
But I think a lot of people had to do it. And now that you've faced yourself and you understand yourself a little bit better, when you reintegrate back into those circles and you notice that you don't quite fit anymore, or it doesn't quite serve you, or things are not, they don't feel quite right,
Yeah.
you're now in a place where it's a lot easier to step away from that, because
Mhm.
you notice that you were alone for a period of time. The world didn't end. You survived. Look at you living in shit.
Yeah.
And you can now go and find what is more reflective of yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I loved that concept. I love that concept that everybody could distance themselves from. I know the topic is social circle, but for me, distancing yourself from the social circle is also very important, so that you can predefine what it is that you are as yourself and get used to that. And then when you go back into those social circles, you sort of start redefining social circles after that, because your level of calm and peace is now more
The
not more
standard that
important,
you're
but
looking for.
also the social circle that everybody is in now also tries to resonate on that level. It tries to resonate on the level that we were at peace, now we're coming back together, right? And we want to maintain that peace, but we want to maintain it together. And I don't know if you've noticed that, but I've noticed that in a lot of my circles, right? People that we used to talk quite a lot to each other, right? Now
Yeah.
now that we've come back into our circles, when we speak, it's only about the same sort of stuff, but there's no disruption and constant back and forth for no reason.
Yeah, there's no like postulation, or there's nothing done for the
Exactly.
sake of doing it.
Yeah.
Now there's more purpose behind everything we do.
Yeah.
Totally agree. So I guess, I mean, that just speaks to changes over time, right?
Mm.
So I guess if thinking back, right, we know what we know now. For example, all our circles need to be small. We need to have certain people in our lives. But looking back and going through your timeline, in your history, how has it changed over the years, and what influenced those changes?
You wanna go first, Dean?
Okay, so my social circle, if I think about it, if I look at my closest friends, my social circle, if I look at my inner circle, right, and Guj was talking about, do people call you Guj on this podcast?
Well, we
They
do
do
now.
now.
we have introduced him as Guj before.
Okay, viewers, Prashant is Guj, or listeners, should I say? Yeah, so you talked about different circles, right? And there's definitely like the outer circle, which I couldn't really be too fussed about. There are people I socialize with; they're more acquaintances, and I can get along with them in certain aspects or certain settings, because there's commonalities that I deliberately engage with so that we can converse, right? But like your inner circle, if I look at that, that's actually it was very very small, and it's grown a bit over the years. If I look at like close friends, it was like Nirav and Nirev, and that was like high school. Owen, and that was more or less. You throw Tashik into that as well. Um, and then that's grown. We got to university. I met Prashanth, a few other people, and then we started working. I met Lee and Yash, and that's kind of that's kind of like my nucleus. In my close friends, my inner circle has grown over the years, not actually tapered off, but that's because I started with so few people to begin with. I don't know if it's been different for you guys.
Yeah, so mine's the other way. Look, we both went to all boys schools, right?
Yeah,
So our social circles, even in those schools, were quite big. I mean, you knew a lot of people,
yeah,
right?
it's quite
You
chaotic as
didn't
well.
necessarily like socialize with them, right? But your circles were largish. And then we went to campus, and for me, campus was like you meet a lot of people and you
Yeah,
interact with a lot of people all the time, right? And you're studying together with different people for different stuff, and you're doing like practicals and experiments. Okay, we engineers, so well,
it's quite
myself
a
and
big
Yash
change
were,
as well coming from an all boys school.
yeah,
Let's not
and then
discount that.
yeah, I mean, look, once you introduce girls into the scenario, especially for
Chaos,
people that have been to an all boys school, it
complete chaos.
changes it changes things a little bit, right? So your social circles change, and
That's why I
when I
failed
went
first
to
year.
campus, I mean, our social circle at campus was massive, man.
It was, but the thing is, like
It's
within
like
your inner
25
circle,
people.
it was maybe more. It was because there was the UDW crowd and there was the Howard
Yeah,
crowd, so it
yeah,
was pretty
but I mean,
large.
yeah, but I mean
But
that
how
was
many
our
of them
social
were you
circle, right? I
actually
mean, you
close
knew
to?
everybody in the circle. We'd play soccer with everybody like twice a week,
So
right? Right. So your
True.
social circles were massive, right? But as you say, your inner circles were so small, right? But you're viewing it as my closest friends. But for me,
Yeah.
I view it as, because remember, at some stage, I would rely on so many different people for so many different things, right? And then, even though it wasn't like the, it wasn't always the person that I would speak to about the most important things in my life. There was
Yeah.
always people that you would rely on for different things. Like the guys that you'd hang out with for first to fourth period were completely different from the guys that you'd hang out from sixth to eighth period in the day. When I say period, I mean different classes that we had, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody was busy studying different things and doing things at different times. And the only time I'd see Dean was like on a weekend because he wasn't studying with us and he was overseas. So when he came, and then we'd met and stuff, and then we'd only see Dean on weekends because he never really studied at the campus we did. So your social circles changed all the time, and because I was jumping from group to group, because I used to study myself, not with all the other people in my class, right? I used to jump from group to group to group to study this, study there, study here, but like your social circles change so much. And for me, that changed drastically down. It like funneled down into like a group of like 5 to 8 people total that I know, that I speak to nowadays. And it's a huge difference. And the crazy thing is that if you ask Dean now, the people that he spends most of his time with now were probably not the people that he spent the most of his time with in the first 18 to 25 years of his life, you know.
Yeah. They
And
weren't really
that's,
there
yeah,
during that period.
yeah, and
But I mean, to your point there, if I look at that outer circle, the outer circle's gotten considerably smaller, right, or
yeah,
thinner, if you want to call
yeah,
it that, and the inner circle's grown.
yeah, for sure.
so what influenced those changes then? Like, what were the key factors to influence these changes to either increase that inner circle or decrease the outer circle?
Ah,
What were the key influences?
okay,
Can you identify any?
yeah, I
Yeah.
could. I think it's pretty. For me, it's pretty simple, right? I don't know, but that's just me. One, your preferences start honing down because the younger you are, the least preference you have, the more you want to like open your eyes to things, right? And you want to go experience stuff and do stuff. But the older you get, the more you find that you like certain things, and all the people that don't like those same things and don't want to spend all those time doing the stuff that you like, you sort of don't spend time with them anymore. So they sort of, the friendship bond sort of gets weaker, you know. But it's also a thing of people move on with their lives. I mean, some people move overseas, some people move to different cities. You don't see them no more. You don't talk more unless you actually keep in contact with the most important people. It's sort of it does eventually go away, and I think that happens to most people. I mean, when you leave schools and campuses, because those environments are always geared to you leaning on people, whereas now in your working career, you can't really lean on. A lot of people do have work friends, but there's also a case of most people don't keep their friends from work on weekends, right? And your social circles are just based on who you kept in contact with in your past, and that's why it turns out, because people just go in different directions. I
Yeah,
mean,
the bond
yeah,
necessarily wasn't strong enough.
yeah. I mean, you remember how many friends we used to have, and we used to make fun of them because the guy got a girlfriend and then he just like stopped talking to his friends, you know? But I mean, that happens everywhere, right? And some people,
Yeah.
they get married and they just go off. Like, remember, Yash, remember Sundar? When
Yeah.
was the last time you spoke to Des?
Um,
You know what I'm saying? But
no, no,
That answers
I
the
totally
question.
get
we
you. I
used to
totally
spend
get you.
every day together. It's just because
Yeah.
of how the direction of their lives. But
Yes.
it comes down to the direction of your life and your preferences. It literally comes down to those things. Well, for me anyway. I don't know.
I think for me, the outer circle, 100% right. To your point there, good preferences. My outer circle thinned out because I realized I was giving my time out way too freely. I was just like, I was happy to spend time with anyone and everyone, and I didn't realize how draining it was for me. I'm an introvert by nature, but whenever someone said, come join us or something, I'd be like, okay, cool, I'll come join. And I think that was when I was very young and I didn't quite understand the dynamic of what it meant to be part of a group. And, like it was just nice to fit in. And I just realized over the years that my time needs to be more carefully managed because A, it's training to be with social circles that take energy, not give it. And B, I need to do things that help me progress in my own life. So I can't just be, spending so much time socializing. And because of that, you start trimming away circles that, aren't unnecessarily reflective of you. So that's how the outer circle got smaller. But the inner circle of why that started growing was because, like you talked about people that you depended on or you relied on. I was taught from a very young age to never rely on everyone or anybody, and it was like I got given a bunch of toxic coping mechanisms that I had to sort of let go of gradually, and it was a long and tedious process. But as I started learning to trust people, and this was because they were in my life for a certain period of time, or we'd gone through some sort of hectic life event or trauma, and I saw what they're like when the shit hits the fan, pardon the French, that I realized I could then trust those people. And then coupling that with the notion of depending on people is not a sign of weakness, and letting go of those toxic coping mechanisms, that culminated in me allowing more people into my inner circle. And that's how that circle started to grow.
I like that. I like that concept that you phrase in terms of depending on people isn't it isn't a crutch.
No,
And
it's not.
one should never see it as a crutch. But a lot of people do, a lot of people like to be self-sufficient, and that's great and everything. But I, I think that it's very important that you have that sort of dependability on people that are around, especially the people that you want to have around you, and they want to have you around them,
Yeah.
because it creates a symbiosis where you learn from each other. And I
Yes,
think,
and like
yeah,
the biggest lesson I learned in this whole thing was dependence is not what's the word I'm looking for? It's not something that's forced. It's a choice. Like I've lived so much of my life like forcing myself to be independent that I know I can do anything I need to on my own. So now that I've learned that, like if ever I was stranded, I can handle the situation. I'll be fine. But I'm not like living life that way is very difficult and very draining. So it's okay to allow people in because then there's more energy for yourself, and it also allows people to contribute to your life in a meaningful way because people do want to help you, whether you want to acknowledge that or not. Like sometimes people genuinely just want to help you, and the notion that dependence is not forced upon you, you're not stuck being dependent on others. You can choose to be dependent on others, and you yourself have the power to be independent. And that was a very important distinction. That was the big game changer for me.
I think it's very important that you say that, especially with regards to energy. Like you say, people will give you energy. Um, and I think it's very important to notice in your social circles how I think we've discussed this before on a previous podcast, but I think Dean, you know this concept. It's one where you know how you view people, right? And for me, social circles, I view it this way. I view when I pick my social circle, it must be a place that I go to where I gain energy, right? And that's
Yes.
what I think you've done for yourself. You've picked the people that in your life are so important to you because every time you spend time with them, the energy that's passed between you two increases your level of energy,
Yeah.
instead of depleting it. There's no one person on one side that's taking energy and one person that's giving it. It's a thing where both multiply the energy that you both have. And It might seem a little bit like a crazy topic to people that don't really understand it, but for me, it's the thing of think about it when you spend time doing stuff, right, and you really enjoy it. When you're done doing those things afterwards, do you feel more energized or less energized? You feel more energetic or more fulfilled, right?
That's
Because
exactly it.
yeah, you feel more fulfilled because you spend time doing something that like actually makes you happy. And when you find people that do that for you in your social circles, that I think is a good social circle, you know. Whereas you get social circles where people go to just like deplete themselves of energy, um, which I would consider in my life a bad social circle, you know. So
I guess they're not aware of it
no,
at
yes,
that
yeah,
point. Then so
yeah,
they're unaware that
yeah,
they're doing those things to
yeah.
themselves.
Look, I mean, it's a thing of look at what happens after you do stuff, right? Like at work, right? You're completely drained all the time. Well, some people are, right? Um, um, and say, for example, you go out with certain people, right? And when you get home, you're like, oh my God, that was a great evening, right? And I feel so happy that I went out. Or you come back and you're like, okay, we went and saw all the people. Now we can chill, get into my PJ pants, and I can watch a movie that I'm more interested in than thinking about all the stuff that I just did that was so fun, right? Then you see the difference, you know. Some people want to go
Yeah.
to the event then get away, where some people want to go to the event and stay as long as they can, you know. So
Yeah.
it's clearly what happens. Now, as Yash says, sometimes you don't notice that you're depleting yourself. I think it's something where the person themselves just needs to analyze how they feel afterwards. Um, and that's the scenario that will tell them about how that social circle, what that social circle does for them.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's good that you bring that up
Yeah.
because that's one of the steps that you can use to identify whether they belong or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and how you interact going forward. Anything that you learn by interacting in a particular group, you can take that with you, and then use those learnings in a different group, in a different scenario,
Of course. Yeah.
um, to gain better understandings, to gain better knowledge,
Yeah.
and maybe better friends as well.
Yeah. So there is also the other side of the coin. You know, sometimes you might okay, because if you look at it, right, there's the other element of social circles which people don't really talk about, right? It's the element of ranking in a social circle, right? Now, ranking is very important because how you view yourself in a social circle is also based on how you rank yourself in a social circle, right? And I think it's something that's very important that it's not everyone needs to understand this, but it's the way I view it. Because say for example, you join a new social circle, right? And everybody views you as the new guy, right? And you do stuff, and then everyone's like, okay, this guy's cool. Or you join a social circle, and everyone's like, oh, okay, this guy's just a bit weird, you know? Automatically you join a social circle, and you might be a great person and everything, but other people view you differently, right? So the social circle might be great for you because it's doing the thing that you love, right? So say for example, you love go-karting, right? And you join a group of people that love go-karting. Now go-karting is, I don't know what another bumper cars, right? For people that don't know what go-karting is, because I don't know if that's a South African term or not, but yeah. Um, but say for example, you love it, right? But say for example, people don't like the way you look, but you're a great go-karter. All of a sudden, you're doing something that you love, but you're not ranked highly, so it depletes you of energy, even though you're doing something that you love, right? And how
You're
does
not
that
getting the
change?
acceptance.
You know what I'm saying, right? So then it turns something that you really love into something that you end up hating, right? So what you do in those scenarios is actually you need to reframe the scenario for yourself, right? Because it happens to a lot of people, right? It really does. They're going to go do something that they really, really love, but because of the people that they're doing that specific thing with, right? It's draining them of energy. So the best thing that you can do in that scenario is to reframe that scenario for yourself, because you don't want to just leave a social circle or leave a circle of people that you like doing stuff with just because you're in a position that drains yourself. If you reframe it and you explain to the people that you're with that this is how you think, this is what you do, blah blah blah, they can view you differently, and then it automatically and sometimes changes the way you experience those circles as well, right? So it's something that's not always spoken about, not always thought about, but
And it's not always done
yeah,
because people are more I guess influenced
yeah,
um, by the larger group.
yeah,
When you're in that social setting,
yeah,
and you have to adapt to their kind of way instead of kind of owning your own self
Yeah.
and speaking up about it, like you just mentioned now.
Yeah. Even if
Yeah,
you just
because
do it to
being
yourself.
disruptive is dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It
No,
can get
look,
you kicked out of the group.
yeah. No, look, it can happen as well. But then again, Dean, if you do that and you speak up for yourself, and then you get left out of the group, right? Essentially you did yourself a favor, right?
It's a
Yes.
win-win, but
Yeah.
no one ever sees it that way because it's a scary thing to do. And if there's that huge loss aversion that you feel if
Yeah.
if they do kick me out, then what am I going to do? But if they kick you out, it's actually for the better, like you say.
Yeah. I mean,
But no one sees it that way in the
no.
beginning.
Yeah. Look, that's the scary part. I think about it. You don't want to get left out, but you want to get treated better. And that's the scary thing about social circles, especially with people that don't have a welcoming set of personalities.
But it's also linked to how confident you are in a particular group
Of course, yeah.
and social scenario,
Yeah.
how comfortable you are with yourself.
How much you respect yourself.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
To know certain boundaries and to put limitations on people, kind of influencing you to a point where you don't actually like to do things anymore.
Yeah.
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 Okay, so what are your? I just want to quickly just a brief point on this. What are the current compositions in terms of characters in each of your social circles currently?
Okay.
So what is that? What does that make up? So do you need different character components to a social circle in order for it to function?
Can you
In your
define
opinion?
character components?
Yeah, I mean character components like let's just say out there people who are vibrant, people who are good at different things. Let's just say in that circle. What's that current composition like now, or do you all just have like-minded, similar people, similar types to yourselves?
Can I go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of how I look at my circle, I don't know if I necessarily have character archetypes that I can clearly classify people as. What I do say though is for my that close inner circle, the things that are sort of non-negotiable criteria. So trustworthiness, like emotional intelligence, being able to understand perspective. And one thing that, if I look at my inner circle, one thing that all those people have in common is that I can trust them with my life, and conversations with them, not only do they give me energy, but they give me different perspective on things. That it's perspective that I either saw and didn't spend enough time looking at, or I didn't see at all, and they drew more attention to it. So they're people that cause a lot of growth and they provide stability. That's who if those are the criteria really. They're all kind people. They're all, intelligent people, but that seems to be more of a byproduct. It's the emotional intelligence that I was looking for rather than intellectual intelligence. And that's pretty much it, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Look, I sort of do have a similar inkling towards Dean to say the same thing. I do. So I'm a person that likes to label things because it makes it clear for me to understand them. So it's not that I'm saying I'm labeling people, but I'm labeling characteristics within people that I like to have around me. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
it's a thing for me where I, like, as you say, Dean, you have certain basic minimum characteristics, right?
Yeah.
But each person has the other things about them that are not the same as other people. So there's always that one guy who's a little bit more funnier than everybody else. There's one guy that's a little bit more adventurous than everybody else, But those are
Yeah.
just characteristics of those people. But I think
Yeah.
it's very important what you say about those base minimum characteristics, right? You want those people in your life, right? You want those people that have stability to themselves, have emotional intelligence, can understand you for who you are and accept you for who you are. Right?
That's it. I mean, that is so important.
Right. It's one of the most important things. You don't want to join a group where you can you can love those people, right, and they can love you back. But if they don't accept you intrinsically for who you are, right, it automatically becomes I think for you and me and Yash, it becomes a thing where do you really want to spend time with somebody who doesn't accept who you are? They may not accept everything about you. Like, you may not like everything that I do, which is fine. I mean, we're different people, right? But
Yeah.
there's certain things about you that we sort of have to agree upon, even though we don't say it, right? There must be that base minimum agreement, and I think that's very important. But I think we do have in our social circles like people that have different traits that we like to have those traits about. There's always somebody that you can depend on all the time. Like, I know you say that you always want those people that you can rely on to like, you can depend your life on, right? But there's always those people that you always depend on, right? That you'll always ask the question to first, right?
Yeah.
Or you'll always go to for a specific thing, and you go to other people for specific things. But that's because you've noticed those characteristics within them and those traits within them after they've met your minimum criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I kind of allude to that question because do you see in any of them their characteristics that you would like to adapt and take on for yourself as well, which is why you kind of hang out with some of them? So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, so for me, I love learning as well, right? But I love learning from real life and people scenarios, right? That's my jam. I enjoy doing that. I love talking about stuff, right? And that's where I do my most learning, right? Because learning from other people, and as Dean says, their perspectives is what it's a governing factor, right? And if people's perspectives change based on their characteristics, and you like to learn and adapt those characteristics, you'll even find that people's mannerisms change based on the people that they're with. But they like
Yeah.
the mannerisms that other people have, so they seek those mannerisms in those people, and then they adapt those mannerisms. It's the same with the characteristics. You find someone who's a lot calmer, you want to spend time with someone who's a lot calmer because it brings calm to your life. So you learn about how they think. When you learn how they think, you innately yourself become calmer because you adapt to that lifestyle that way, right? So yeah, I think it's a huge thing when it comes to social circles, adapting from characteristics that other people have, because we're as a human race, we're basically, I learn from what I see, right? And you pick what you want to learn based on what you see. And I think that's definitely a
That's
yes.
a big topic right there.
Yeah.
Do you mind if we just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah.
Go for it.
The
Go
whole
for it.
if like the what Prashant just said there, that I learn from what I see. That's true from the beginning, like from when we were babies, right? We learn by watching people. And how many different things have we picked up? Like, we pick up all of our like toxic coping mechanisms, our behavioral aspect from family members, all of that stuff. And when you're a child and you pick it up, that stuff sits with you for so long, and it sits in the background because it's like automated, and it's so much harder to deprogram. But where I'm going with this is that we learn by observation, right? And if we look at observation as sensory, which is you can observe by seeing, you can observe by hearing, you can observe by feeling, you can observe by tasting and smelling. I think there's one area of observation not none of us, I'm sure people do, but people often discount, is that you can observe emotionally by feeling things. Like, all three of us consider ourselves to be fairly empathic, right? Like, we consider ourselves to be empaths. How much of your life have you learned by feeling what others feel and taking that on? And how conscious of it are you? Am I making sense? I don't know if I'm just
for
rambling.
sure.
Yeah,
dude.
100%.
So,
100% to that.
yeah.
I'm gonna simplify. I'm gonna simplify that entire. Well, I'm not gonna simplify it. I'm gonna throw in a very funny saying, but it also could be derived at derogatory, monkey see, monkey do type of thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of
No, but that's
it,
the
but-
underlying basis, right?
yeah.
So, I mean, imagine if you're a child, right, and you walk into a room and the room is happy because they're laughing and it's a jovial environment. The child is going to feel that first and then understand that this environment is a jovial feeling environment. Same if, like, the environment is tense. A child will feel the tension and not know why, but it understands that environment's tense. And then you carry that with you for God knows how many years. And every time you're in that environment, you're tense and you don't even know why, because you learned it by experiencing it.
It's like an involuntary action because you
empath.
already know it, right?
Yes, but it's something that you learned by feeling.
Yeah, but it's in your subconscious, right? It's sitting
Yeah.
there in your subconscious, and your subconscious is it's manifesting within your within your physical body, but you can't notice it because you've never dealt within the depths of that emotion, right? And you never dealt within the depths of that situation. Did you ever sit back and think, how did I react in that scenario compared to, because I cracked a joke, right? Say for example, I cracked a joke. How did I react to everybody else reacting to me? Because that is in itself also something that you need to know. I'm not saying you have to go and analyze everything that you do, but if you understand how you react to those situations, all of a sudden you become someone that understands how empathetic you are, right? And how your
Yeah.
subconscious has been developed over time, right? And
Yes.
it's so important that way because I've learned so many things about myself, right? I crack a lot of jokes for fun and stuff, but it's also a defense mechanism, right? But you
Yeah.
do that in social circles because you've been trained to do that in social circles. Because a defense mechanism is a mechanism to say, listen, I'm doing this because I want to fit in.
Or I'm afraid, or
Yeah,
I'm at risk, or I feel
yeah,
threatened, or something to that effect.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's a thing that pops up within you because, or it's you've learned it over the years, right? Of you going
Yeah.
through certain traumatic situations, or not even traumatic, but just you going through different situations, because not everything is linked to trauma. But yeah, it's so important. And the thing you said about empathy is like,
Recognize it as a form of observation as well.
yeah,
Like it's a means of communication, but I think, yeah, recognizing, like, it was a big deal for me to actually acknowledge it as a form of observation, because then I look back at my life and think, how many times did I learn stuff uh, just by feeling it versus
yeah,
how it was taught to me.
yeah,
And then that kind of opened up another can of worms. It's like, what is innately myself and my own characteristics, and what have I learned? Because if I identify as someone who's quite resilient, but I don't know if that's innately me, or did I feel that in both of my parents, who are very resilient people.
mm,
Like, they could have just been sitting down and like doing bills, for example, but there was a resilience in them to make sure these things were paid, because we weren't particularly well off when I was young,
mm,
and my parents had to work very hard to get where they are. But there was definitely a resilience in everything that they did. And did I feel that determination and then go, oh, that's nice. I don't know what it is, but I like it, and I'm going to take it
mm,
for myself,
mm.
and I'm going to keep that. So, like, was it something that I was innately given? It's a nature nurture versus like a nature versus nurture discussion, I suppose. Um, okay, this is another tangent now. Sorry.
No, but I think it's very important what you're saying because so it relates to the social circle because of the fact that, say for example, we use that scenario, right? That scenario of you learned something because you saw somebody else going through an emotion or going through a situation. So you
Yeah.
didn't learn by them teaching you something, but you learned by watching someone experience a good thing or experience a hardship, right? Now, we're naturally you don't want to say empathetic, right? Empathetic's the word, but
Empathic?
empathic.
Is that a word?
Well, empathetic has pathetic in it, so let's go with that one, right? But
We have the goodest English.
the goodest English, right?
The
Very
goodest
good.
English here.
Very, very
So
good.
yeah, so let's go with you learned something by watching somebody else experience a hardship, right? It innately taught you something, right? Now, when you take that and you go into a social circle, you'll apply that naturally, right?
Yeah.
And some people are more uh, empathic than others, right? Now, the people that are less that way, I'm not saying that they'll be more dull to a situation, but they will react more instinctively to who they are versus you who won't. You'll think about everybody else in that scenario, right? And you'll think about how they feel before you react, right? So your reaction is a lot slower, but it's more measured. Whereas a person will naturally laugh at somebody else for falling over, whereas you'll go, oh, sorry, he fell over, then you'll laugh at them, right?
Okay, but hang on though. Is that person laughing at the person that fell over because that's their instinct, or is that a subconscious thing that they saw growing up? They witnessed other people laughing at someone
So
falling down and
it's
learned that that was acceptable, and
it's
therefore continued it.
two different scenarios, right? Some people actually find somebody else falling over funny, but some people actually find it funny because it was always funny to people around them and they got used to it.
That's what I'm asking.
Right. So the person that actually finds it funny is the person that actually is reacting to the situation and they are more themselves than
In that moment, yeah.
they're more themselves in that moment, which you can't really fault them for. If a person is being themselves,
No, you
okay,
can't.
yeah, right?
There's nothing wrong with
But
that.
the person that finds it funny because everybody else found it funny before, that's a scenario where it's become ingrained in them because they learned from that. you know.
I guess that's narcissistic behavior then.
I don't know if I'm qualified enough to talk about that.
So
But I
I
mean,
don't know
yeah.
about
So that was it. It was a case of, I don't know. Somehow I managed to pull us onto the nature versus nurture topic. But for me, it was a case of making sure that, like, what I learned, I wanted people to maybe experiment with it. Is that acknowledge empathy as a form of observation and question, what did you pick up through feeling and taken on, and is it good or bad, or does it serve you or not?
So that's the thing I wanted to bring it back to. I would say, listen, as a person in a social circle, right? Because we're bringing it back to a social circle, right? How
Yeah.
does empathy that if you are more empathy, if you're a more empathy based person, right? It doesn't mean that it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's more of understand what it does to your reaction and understand. It's very important that you understand how it rings more true to you. If you're a person that is very empathy based, right, and you'll react to the emotion first and then react physically, right, it's not a bad thing. It's
Yes.
just a thing of, does that sit better with you? And if it sits better with you, own it, right?
Hmm.
And that's the most important thing. If you're in a
And does
social
the
circle,
group you're
yeah.
in support that?
Yes. So remember that if you're an empathy-based person, right, you need to have other empathy-based people around you. Because if you're an empathy-based person and everybody else isn't, right, I'm not saying that you must stay away from them. I'm just saying
It'll
learn
be
to
hard.
recognize it because it will make a huge difference to your life. And,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of other things, right? There's like Yash said, there's narcissistic behavior, right? Narcissistic people, right, and empathetic people, right? Those are like those people don't
Worlds apart.
you shouldn't put them in the same room because what
Yeah.
happens is that the empathetic person will just get eaten alive, right? Um, but they don't understand it because they're that way, right? And you can't really blame them for it, but they need to recognize, right, how it's impacting them. But it's also on the narcissistic person because narcissistic people, you can't blame them in a social circle. They may be that way inclined, but it's because of their past, right? It's been developed in them. They need to recognize it, just like an empathetic person needs to recognize it within themselves. It's both sides of the coin, but you need to own who you are, and that's the important thing. So it's never a good or a bad thing. You can't blame the narcissistic person for being a narcissist. What you should do as an empathetic person is understand that that person is a narcissist or understand that person is not a narcissist and expect them to react in that way.
Yeah. Prepare
Okay.
yourself
Yeah,
and
yeah,
protect
because
yourself.
okay, but that's
Like,
also a
more
defense
specifically,
mechanism, right? That's
protect
also
yourself.
yeah, no, but that's also a defense mechanism. And one thing I've learned in my whole life is to try and not create defense mechanisms, but rather to just expect people to act who they are, and when they don't, try and understand it. And if you can't understand it, then ask them. If you don't want to ask them, leave it. Put the people behind you, but never
Yeah.
expect never if you start having to protect yourself from another person, right, before you meet that person, it's a clear tail sign or a telling sign that you should not be involved with that person because you put your wall up before you meet them. You understand?
I lived a lot of my life that way, to be perfectly
Right,
honest.
right. But the thing is that it takes a while to notice it that you're doing it to yourself because
Yeah.
first, and I think Yash has a very good mechanism for this, right? It's a defense mechanism, but it's not a defense mechanism to protect. It's a defense mechanism to um, create create safe spaces, right, for yourself. And everybody needs a safe space, but
It's a boundary.
it's a
That's what it
boundary,
is.
right? It's
Yeah.
definitely a boundary. So you get into a situation and you automatically notice that your anxiety levels have changed. If your anxiety goes from 0 to 5, right? Okay, it's pressure. From 0 to 50, okay, I'm not in the right space. I need to move now quickly. But not everybody can notice that. So you need to learn how to develop those levels of anxiety pickup, especially in your social circles, right? And it's important
Yes.
that you do that.
Practicing consciousness or
Yeah,
mindfulness
it
of
I
your
is.
guess
of
also
your
self-awareness
Yes.
of situation,
Yeah.
people,
yeah.
feelings, your own feelings,
Yeah.
physiology changes within yourself.
Yeah.
There are a lot of, I guess, key
Subtleties.
indicators
Yeah.
that you can pick up on, and you can train yourself to pick them,
Mm.
to pick up on them, in order to be successful in, choosing the right people and putting yourself in the right situations and getting out of situations.
Yeah. For sure, and it's so important that, as Yash says, you need to be able to pick that up in yourself, right? And you can't externalize it onto other people. because that's what a social circle is. It's externalization of who you are to other people and hoping that they accept it.
Yep, that's very true. Very, very true.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the other questions that I had then, leading on from this, is, do you go? I mean, like you guys have mentioned, you go to adapt different characteristics and things like that. Then, does that bring up the topic that you don't feel like you're good enough, and you go to social circles to feel better, or to 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 become better?
Dean, you want to go first?
I can, but
Okay.
okay. So I'm wired very differently, right? And the both of you know
Yeah.
this on a personal level.
Yeah.
So for me, it was never about. I never ever asked the question, "Am I good enough?" And I never compared myself to anybody else because that was never a logical chain of thought. For me, the social circle was just around just finding company, if that makes sense. It was as basic as that. And then as I grew up and grew older, it was about developing and growing myself. So I'm probably not the right person to answer this question.
So,
No, I mean, I
so
get you, because I guess in my younger days, in the social circles that I can, as far back as I can remember,
Yeah.
it's like Prash was saying, there are hierarchy of people within that group. People who obviously put themselves on top above others and things like that, which is why I kind of just alluded to that. Um, if you're, I guess, on the lower end of the rung, do you just join a social circle to try and work your way up that rung?
okay,
I guess, I mean, in our youth, maybe yes,
yeah,
but now probably not.
yeah. So remember that when I say different levels, I mean you yourself are the person that ranks, right? Because as a person, you're the one that judges, right? You're the judger, right? You don't know what the other people are judging. You may say that person is number one in the group, that person is number two, that person is number three. That person is thinking shit. That other person is number one, that other person is number two. Because remember, when you go into a social scenario, you automatically start ranking, right? You do that as a person, as a human being, right? But
I would say I
that
had
only
never done that.
happens. Now, this
That's
is
just,
the change, Dean. That only happens, right? Depending on your level of self consciousness and self awareness, right? The more self aware you are, the less you do that because you don't look at ranking, right? And that's why Dean will tell you, I'm different because I want people that belong with me, right? I don't want people that are better than me so I can learn from them. I don't want people that are worse than me so I can teach them. I'm not saying worse, but different, right? Um, when I say worse, I don't mean I'm better than somebody else, just so that the listeners understand. But
yeah.
and I think I can use a good example. Up until the time I turned like 21, right? I wasn't self-aware. So everything was this person is better than me, and I want to join the circle because I can be closer to them, right? Or this person is better than me. I should stick around them so I can become better, right? So that's the question that Yash was asking. Do you join social circles because you see that there's an avenue for self-growth, or you see that there's an avenue for to be around people that are really cool, right? But the difference is that the more self-aware you become, and when I first started understanding self-awareness and self-consciousness and learning about myself and all of that stuff, you find automatically that those things start going away, right? I'm not saying that you have to go as a person that doesn't understand it, self go and learn about all this stuff. What I'm saying is that as you develop yourself more, right? And Dean has always had to do that because he's said he's always had to deal with it himself. He gets into a social circle now, and it's never about I'm looking and ranking. It's all about, do these people match me on an energy level, right? And if they do,
Yeah.
then I'm happy. But the thing, it changes your dynamic because it changes how you view your circle, right? And that's the best way I can answer the question because at first I join people because they can make me better, right? Now I join people because they match me, right? And that changes because of your level of self awareness. And social circles automatically change depending on the level of awareness within the group.
Is that
If
what
that
you were looking for, Yash?
if that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, no, it,
Yeah.
it does, it does. And it also, I want to bring up a point as well, that some people perhaps think that they should go to a social group to, like Prash alluded to, was to improve on themselves. But improvement doesn't rely on just being part of a social circle. You can't just gain improvement by doing that, or self-growth. Self-growth comes from within yourself, rather
Yes.
than going somewhere else to get it.
You've got to do the work.
Yes, you have to do the work regardless, right?
Yeah.
You can aspire to be more like someone, which is fine, but remember, it's you don't go to that group to make another clone of a person in that group, because we're all individuals at the end of the day anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's another one. There's another question that I have, and I guess this is a bit of a generalization, I would say. So why do you think that guys generally gravitate toward guy-dominated social circles?
Why or what?
I mean, why? Why do you think that's the case?
Dudes, man. Dudes being dudes.
Is it just that?
There's always guys who follow the alpha male, man.
We don't. We don't have one.
Yeah, I mean, everyone in our group has their own area of expertise, if you want to put it that way, right?
Yeah.
But it's a thing of, there's always, if everybody in the group is an alpha male, then everybody follows everybody else for different things. But in most scenarios, right, there's always one guy who's the decision maker and the alpha male, and everybody else follows him. I mean, that's frat boys, that's college, that's high school, that's even social circles outside of all those environments. It happens like in so many social circles.
I do agree with you there, but for me, I felt like whenever I've seen those things unfold, it's always been because people themselves don't want to be responsible for decisions, so they outsource it to a leader, and then they're happy to follow that leader. And if it fails, then you know what, it's okay because they made the decision, the leader made it, and it's fine.
Yeah.
And if it works well, then great. But for me, it's always because people don't want to make their own decisions and they don't want to feel independent in that sense. They like the idea of independence, but they don't want to actually be independent.
When the crux comes down to it, right? When it comes down to it,
like you don't want to be if things fall apart, you don't want to be the person that made the decision that made it fall apart. You'd rather have someone else be the reason it fell apart, and then try and fix it afterwards.
Yeah, but that stems from fear of failure, right?
Yeah, and like fear of failure. Oh my god, that's a whole topic in itself.
No, but I mean, it's a big basic concept in social circles.
I mean, yes, exactly. I mean, I don't know, do you guys want to talk about that now quickly?
Yeah.
It is a composite of it anyway.
Yeah, like, okay, yeah, true, because social acceptance comes from it. I mean, you see this a lot in the Indian community. We're terrified of failing because what are people going to say? You know, what is the social circle? What is your community going to say about you? You tried and you failed, and it's going to bring shame to your house. What a load of shit! My God, I want to shake people violently when I hear this because it has held us back as a community.
Dean woke up and
so
chose
long.
violence today.
Oh my God, you have no idea! I would
He's
shout
right.
at the whole community because, and I'm bordering on a rant here, but I'll dial it back a second. Here's the thing, right? Failure. Back in the day, it was almost like a death sentence. If you failed, it means you didn't provide food for your family or whatever it is. Our folks came from a very scarce time. They grew up with an oppressive government. There was a lot of scarcity. So failure, it was important not to fail, right? And that's why there's such a rampant competitiveness in the Indian community between Indian people, because you all want to be the best, because being the best ensured survival. And now that's why, for some reason, we still want to kill each other. But that's, that needs to be put aside now because we live in a very different world. And the idea of failure is, yes, it hurts, and there's a negative emotional response, but that negative emotional response is important because it's there to draw your attention to something. And if you look at what failure is, it's an outcome, right? It's not necessarily the outcome you wanted, but it's an outcome. And if you break down what an outcome is, it's a data set coded to an effort you made. So it's very specific feedback, which is incredibly valuable. It's information. And if you ask people, how many of you are afraid of information? No one's going to say, I'm afraid of information. But that's what failure is. It's information. And it's not logical to be afraid of it.
Aren't they then afraid then of the resultant of that information?
See,
I'm
getting to that.
Itself, not the
But
information
I'm getting to
itself,
that,
but
right?
just cool.
It's that feeling of failure, right? That is associated, that negative feeling, and what are people going to think? That's a separate thing. That's something we've taken on. But if you look at intrinsically, you're afraid of when you fail, you feel bad about it. That's important. That emotional response is important because it's telling you that you need to pay attention to the outcome now, right? And when you look at that failure, it's learnings, it's information. So I described it, I think, to Prashant like this. It's a wrapping paper and a present. The negative emotions are wrapping paper. It's there to draw your eyes to the present, and the present is the information. But for some reason, we hold on to the negative emotions, i.e., the wrapping paper, and then we go throw the present away.
Indian people love storing wrapping paper. Huh?
It's very, there's layers to this conversation. It's very reflective of our community, but that's what it is. It's like we hold on to the wrapping paper and then we throw the present away. It's as if the feelings are more important than the lesson.
Yeah.
And that's been ingrained in us, right? I guess programmed.
Yeah.
But that's
and
exactly it. That is.
I think Prash mentioned on previous podcasts as well that it's about teaching yourself to deprogram yourself from these debilitating traits that you've picked up along your way.
Yeah.
Yeah, the limiting beliefs podcast.
But it's exactly that. It's exactly what Yash says. It's been ingrained in us not to fail, right? So that's why we're so competitive, because you want to win, right? But failure, it's like, I did all of this and I still failed. But people don't understand that whether you fail or not doesn't really make too much of a difference, because people don't. You see, the failure mechanism. If you do a failure mechanism understanding on a child who's 5, right, that didn't have to worry too much about whether they passed or failed stuff, you'd see them just pick it up and try again, right? They wouldn't really like, messed up, let me just pick it up. But if you see the same thing in an adult who's 30 years old, the failure mechanism has so much more of an emotional swing. If you guided both emotional of a 5-year-old and a 30-year-old on failure and passing, you'd see that the emotional swing on the 30-year-old was so much higher because there was so much riding on it. But if you broke it down into its simple understanding for the 30-year-old, you'd see that automatically they wouldn't care too much. And that's exactly what Dean is saying. But the problem is, as Yash says, it's ingrained in you so hard that you feel bad every time you fail. And that for me was like, it took me a while to learn that within myself. But the more you learn, it's like, oh, okay, I made a mistake. You know?
That's exactly it. Failure is not the end of the road. It's just a lesson on the way.
But yeah, okay, so there's a difference, right? So failure, and then fear of failure. So fear of failure is the preemption of the emotion, or the preemption of the negative emotion that you're going to have when you fail. Now,
Yes.
Imagine that, right? So you're building up the roller coaster before you fail, right? And you're creating.
I mean, you're manifesting your own failure.
One, you manifesting your own failure. 2, you delving into potential energy, right, to create an emotion that protects yourself from the fact that you might fail. Now,
and anxiety.
Look at what it does to the people, right? All of a sudden, there's one person in the group who just doesn't give a shit whether they fail or not. They automatically become the alpha. So now you want to be an alpha in a group, just don't care whether you fail or not. All of a sudden, everybody in the group will just follow you, right? And it's not even you have to be the strongest. You don't even have to be the fastest. You just have to not care whether you pass or fail, right? In a scenario, look at what that's doing to people. Look at what the fear of failure does to people from the fact of, listen, if I went into a scenario and I failed, right, I'd feel bad, right? If I went into a scenario knowing that I could possibly fail, imagine how much worse I would feel, because I'd create the potential energy of hope, right? And then I'd fail. It's like a roller coaster going up and then going down.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what fear of failure does to people. And that's exactly why they'll let somebody else make decisions for them, right? Even though they can easily make the best decisions, right? But they'll let someone else make the decision for them that may not even suit them.
Yeah.
That's group dynamics, though, right?
That's group dynamics.
Yes.
And because if they had to do that on their own, they'd make that decision.
But that's exactly why politicians are where they are. I mean, they don't care about failing, right? They just go there and they're like, I'm going to say what I want to say, and people are going to follow me because they're too scared to say what I'm saying.
Well, opposed to what they're saying.
Yeah.
Right?
No, even
I think for people, though, just a different way to look at this is that failure and success are both wins, right? They're just different types of wins. If you succeed, then yes, you got what you wanted. If you failed, then you still got something valuable out of it. So
you got the lesson, right?
Yes. So you should feel excited about doing something, not about the end result, because at the end result, you're going to win regardless. It's either going to be a short-term win or a long-term.
I remember telling Dean, so I was writing an exam, I think 2 weeks back.
Yeah, it was a couple of weeks.
Remember, Dean, I told you like the night before, regardless of the outcome, I still won.
Yes, that's the mindset you should be in. It's like then you're not concerned about pass or fail, right? Because you've already achieved what you're looking for. You care about what you're trying to do, and that's the thing. Like you should always care about what you're trying to do, but not care about the pass or the fail dynamic of it all.
Okay, so that in a social circle, right, would if someone understood that in a social circle, imagine
Busted wide open.
you'll bust that social circle wide open because now all of a sudden you're not reliant on some alpha person in the group to make decisions for you. And all of a sudden, if you become a decision maker, people will follow you. Yes, you want to be a leader and all of that stuff is nice. But the best thing to do is actually to train other people within that social circle of yours to think the same way. And all of a sudden,
Which is also a type of following because they're following your lead and doing it for themselves in a sense.
yeah. So that is something that's very important. That the fear of failure is something that
It's crippling,
it's crippling, but also
and it's illogical crippling as well.
it is. But remember, Dean.
I
Remember,
mean, we can say it's illogical,
Yeah,
but remember when
yeah.
we're in the grips of fear,
yeah,
if you don't understand it, you can't process it, and you will just be consumed by it.
Yeah, look, my frustration is not around that. My frustration is how we as a community have perpetuated this idea for generations on end. And yes, it served its purpose once upon a time, but it doesn't anymore. It's holding us back in a tremendous way.
You see, for me, it's when we're bringing it back to that whole thing. It's so hard for a single person to even remind themselves that fear of it. Like think about it in a scenario, right? Fear of failure is still gonna strike anyway, even though you understand the concept, right? It's still gonna strike because you forget, right? You have to continuously remind yourself that it doesn't matter if I fail, I'll still be okay. Doesn't matter if I fail, I'll still be fine, right? For new people,
That's important
yeah,
what you just said, though.
Yeah.
Like the whole, it doesn't matter if I fail, I'll still be okay. Because a lot of people, if they fail, they think they're going to die. It's like my world is going to end if I fail.
Yeah.
But you will endure, you will continue surviving, and then you could try again. It's like if I succeed, I get what I want. If I fail, then I get information on how to win.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
It's
So be excited regardless.
The problem is that people forget when they're in that scenario. Like you can have this discussion with somebody, and then they go back to their social circle, and then automatically they fall into that space.
Fall in line again.
Yeah, because behavior is hard coded into you through experiences, and it's written in through emotion. Right? You remember stuff, like all your memories, if you think about it, you don't remember the scene. You remember how you felt, and the scene comes afterwards. Yeah. Right? Even smells, tastes, all that kind of stuff. You remember how you felt, and then everything else comes afterwards.
So,
and it talks back to the whole pay attention to emotion as an observation tool, because that's how you've picked up all of these things.
Exactly. But the thing is that using that emotional observation tool is the best way to overcome fear of failure as well. Because if you now understand the concept, go back to your social group and see how other people react because of their fear of failure. The minute you do that with other people, what you've essentially done is label everybody else's level of fear. The next time you go back to that social group, you'll be so much more confident because you know that other people are just as scared as you are, right?
That's a damn good point.
That changes the dynamic. That changes the dynamic of the group for yourself. I'm not saying you have to go out to every social group that you have and show them how much of a baller you are, right? You're not going to do that.
But you take people off a pedestal.
Yes, and it's essentially a form of labeling, right? You go back to your groups and understand that everybody else has a similar or different level of fear that you do of failure. The minute you do that, you break down the group to look at the group and say, listen, they are just as scared as I was. All of a sudden, you don't forget about your fear of failure. But what you do is that you put everybody else on the same playing field. Now you're not scared or you're not upset about it, but you're comfortable with the fact that everybody within your group is just as powerful or powerless as you are. And then all of a sudden, it makes you more powerful than you used to be. Not more powerful than the other people, but more powerful than you used to be because you become more confident in who you are.
I like that. That's
really well grows of other people there. In that.
Remember, it's not to
and you don't come from a place of deficit anymore.
Yeah.
You're not like, I'm less than everyone
because
else.
That's exactly what happens in groups. People go to groups to feel like they're part of something because they felt a deficiency. But what they don't realize is everybody else feels the deficiency. If you notice the deficiency, all of a sudden you you've covered the deficiency by noticing that there isn't a deficiency.
And you don't want a social circle that makes you feel the deficiency even more.
Because that's exactly what it is.
Perpetuate.
Fear of failure is actually nothing. It's nothing. You've created a deficiency, or you've created a fear in yourself, right? As
Yeah.
fear of failure. When you label it, you remove the fear of failure and you remove the deficiency. All of a sudden, you can go into a group and just be who you are.
Yeah, you're just a guy trying something.
Exactly. So and that's the thing. And now I'm not saying go into your groups and just saying, yeah, you're more scared than me. Don't do that, right? Because obviously it's not going to help anybody, right?
Being a
It's
douche.
through observation.
Yes, and that's why
Yeah.
when Dean says gaining emotional strength through observation is so important, because you don't have to go there and you're a narcissist and you're an empath and you're weaker than I am and you think you're stronger, but I don't have a fear. You don't need to do that, right? You just need to understand that everybody is different, but what you've created within yourself, you need to learn how to remove that, because it will just allow you to be comfortable. And that's why when people say, yeah, just be who you are and always be true to yourself, bro, that's one of the hardest things you can tell anybody, right?
Exactly.
You can't tell somebody to be who you are, because they're like, when someone tells you to be who you are, that's the first thing you'll do is, who am I? Right? It's like saying,
Yeah.
don't think about a pink elephant. All of a sudden, you're going to think about a pink elephant. It's the same thing. Don't just be who you are. The person's going to go, oh, who am I? Now, who do I want to be today? You know,
Yeah.
you can't do that. You need to define for yourself and be comfortable with what you have, what you don't have, and see it in other people, because everybody is a reflection of yourself at some point. If you see that in other people, you'll be more comfortable with who you are.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Now you bring up something. Well, what leads to what I wanted to say next, or what I wanted to ask next, is you see yourself at some point in each one of these people. So what do you mean by that when you say that?
Okay, so remember that, look, someone said it, but I believe this is very true. In every scenario, you're only seeing what you want to see, but also you're seeing different formations of what you imagine to be true, right? Because you're only looking at it from your perspective. You're not looking at it from other people's perspective. So whatever you see in those other people is some form or reflection of what it is that you understand, right? And Dean and I have had long conversations about every scenario and every possible moment in time that you are imagining within yourself. But and that's some scary stuff, because you go down the rabbit hole. But it's always a thing of, for me, of in every scenario that you have, you're only ever viewing everything from your perspective, and that is a reflection of what it is that you understand and what it is that you see. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Reality is limited to people's perspective.
Yeah.
And it's governed by people's perspective. So, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, Yash.
No, it does. So now moving forward, so how do you foster your relationships, or the relationships that you want to keep in these circles? So what steps do you actively take? Do you do it regularly, and how do you foster these relationships?
I'm quite bad at this, right? Because I live in my own head, right? Like I live in my own head, and my closest friends have told me that I live in my own head, and I know that, and I know why now. But so for me, like I need to consciously remember that, listen, I need to spend time conversing with these people. And it's not because I don't enjoy it. I really, really do enjoy it. It's just that I get drawn into, like my own inner monologue and like living in my little bubble so much that, like if someone doesn't come and say, hey, do you want to meet up? Then I can, disappear from the world for periods of time.
So, like, what are your active steps then? Like, besides reminding yourself, do you like what is that? What is it? An actual physical reminder?
No, it's more like, okay, so having different WhatsApp groups is really helpful in that sense, because people are always engaging and interacting, and then you can at least participate in it, right? So there's an example of where technology has really, really helped. But if there's stuff that I really feel like it's important to discuss, or like I've come across something interesting in life, or I need another perspective, then I'll call on those different people and say, hey, you want to meet up, and then I'll organically bring up the conversation there. There was, like these people are people I trust to converse with. It's not that that's the only reason I wanted to talk to them. It's because there's a lot of trust there, and I feel like this is something that I want to share with them. And that's how I go about it. It's like whenever I've come across stuff in my life, with, important things, pieces of information, personal developments, all of that kind of stuff, then I will go ahead and try and make time for that. It's been a lot harder with the pandemic because now we're kind of like locked in our houses. Whereas before there was always some sort of social gathering, like we're meeting up at someone's house, or like, are we going out this weekend? So that kind of took care of itself in that sense. I've had to become more conscious of it since the pandemic because it's much easier to withdraw into yourself when you can't go outside.
Is that then just you preferring your peace rather than conversing with other people?
Tough question. Because living in my own head is a means of peace, but these people are not people that disrupt that peace. They're very much people that make it stronger, if that makes sense. I mean, these are also people that will tell me things that I want to hear and call me out on my bullshit. But I find there's a lot of value in that. I don't mind criticism. I don't mind someone telling me that I'm full of shit. Because it's true, I am full of shit. But I also value people that will call that out in me, because how else do you recognize those things that you need to develop and work on?
True. If you can't accept what people say.
Yes, and I know that when they're saying that, it's not coming from malintent. It's coming from a place of love.
Yes, which is why I needed you to go shopping with me.
So, oh God, Yashin is clothing things. One day, Yash, one day.
Prash, how do you deal with fostering relationships that you want to keep?
Just as bad as Dean. But I view them in a different way, right? So I know that everybody that's in my circle, I think it gets to a point where, like what Dean says, you trust those people implicitly, right? But it's also a give and take. So they trust you the same way. Mm. So even if you don't speak to them for like 3 or 4 months, when you do have a phone call, it's like you never really stopped talking. It's just like a catch up.
That's very true.
So it becomes a scenario, but it depends on the type of friendships that you have, right? So we have these friendships where if I don't speak to Dean for like 3 months, right, but then I say, hey, how's it? And you have a conversation. It's like you didn't really change anything. You just didn't speak for a while because you were off doing your own things, right? And that it's sort of, there's a level
of that base understanding.
Yeah, there's a level of understanding.
It talks very much to trust.
Yeah, it talks very much to trust. It's also a thing of like, if you ever had a problem, you always knew that you could come to me and ask me if you needed help,
100%.
right?
100%.
And that level of trust is in that friendship because it's sort of been there as a baseline. And so yes, it's bad that you don't foster the relationship from a point of we talk all the time, right? But okay, look, as Dean says, this pandemic's made it bad. I'm personally bad at keeping in contact with people. I know that because I'm just bad at it, okay? I get lost in my own world and whatever I'm doing can take up my whole day very easily. And then it's weeks and then it's months. And you should ideally speak to people and set reminders to speak to people because there's people that are important to you, right? But for me, it's a thing of, I'm good, you're good. If we need anything, or if you need to speak about something, or you need advice, or I need advice, then speak to them, right? But it's a thing of...
I think it's also... Sorry, Prash. What I was going to say is I think, like, if I look at Prashant and myself, and, like, we do... There are periods where we go months without speaking to each other, but I'm never concerned that he's going to think, oh, Dean's not my friend anymore.
Yeah.
I'm also never concerned that if shit hits the fan, I know if he needs me, he'll call, and he knows that I'll be there.
Yeah.
Like, that's never in doubt. So there's an innate security about the friendship. Yeah. So even if we don't speak to each other for 6 months, if we bump into each other, it'll be like 3 hours worth of catch up, and then we'll be like, oh shit, we need to go home.
Yeah. You know what? That's the thing. I think that's the best way to answer Yash's question. You develop friendships that do not need fostering.
Yeah, it's not maintenance.
Yeah, you don't.
There we go. I mean, that's kind of what I was looking for.
So if you create a friendship that needs fostering, all of a sudden there's a reliance, right?
And it feels like work.
Then that's not really a true friendship, right? You can identify it by that.
Look, it can be a true friendship, but it's like, listen, some people like to work on things, okay, like their friendship. Some
That's
people
fair.
like to go hiking and build a friendship up and like share ideas all the time because they like to have ideas bouncing off each other. But I think we're getting to an age now where people are so self-sufficient, right, that they only use their friendships. And when I say use, I mean not like use from a point of
Not in a
I'm
bad way,
using you,
please.
but
Not in a bad way.
yeah,
It's
but
not like
they use
Engage
their
in friendships.
friendships to gain from each other when it is a requirement, but they also understand that it's a like a bipartisan relationship that's it's a symbiosis, right? But it's not
Yeah.
a consistent symbiosis. And you want friendships that have that level of strength, because even if I don't speak to Dean for an entire calendar year, right, and I go and speak to him the next day, right, nothing will change.
Yeah.
And you want those fosterlessness relationships because it gives you that element of, if I need anything, I know that I can rely on X, right? I'm not saying you should go out and find those people and then befriend them and then say that you're going to be the person I
Disappear
speak
from
to and I need help from you. That's not how it is. But you sort of develop those friendships based on who you are. And there's other people that are like you and exactly have that same requirement, if you know what I'm saying. But when there is interaction, that level of interaction is not, it's not high level. It's very high frequency, but low level, right?
I love the way you put
Right?
that.
It's not high level, because high level is, hey, how are you? How's the weather? Blah 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 blah.
Superficial
Yeah,
nonsense.
you want, hey, how is your family doing, as the first question, right? And then how's that one problem that you had 6 months ago? How's that doing, right? Because you get to that level of understanding very quickly. So it's a low level conversation, but with a very high frequency, right, of vibration.
Yeah, the
And
substance.
that
Yeah.
that is what you ideally want to get to. Well, when I say you, I mean this is the level that I want, right? And this is the level that I expect. If I have friends that are very high level and low frequency, I tend not to foster those relationships.
Yeah, they get moved to the outside of the circle until they drop off the map.
Well, essentially that's what happens, right? I'll speak to you and I'll continue a conversation, right? But at some point, I know that you know that you're continuing this conversation because you need something from me,
Sure.
right? And that's so
It's
important to notice. It's so important to notice when someone wants something from you and when someone wants to contribute something to you. There's a huge divide, right? It's very important to notice when someone is speaking to you because they want something from you.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess once again it leads to your own understanding of what a relationship is,
Correct.
and what people are are being part of the relationship means to them,
Motives.
and what are they going
Motives.
to get from it, and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What people are going to contribute, and at what level they're going to contribute as well, in that interaction. I mean then that's one side, right? That's just fostering the relationships, and we all know that saying goodbye is one part of social circles as well, to those that don't belong. So how has this been handled in the past?
Personally,
Krishna are very different here.
yeah, I deal with things very badly, because I let it affect me, right? But I do it knowing that I'm doing it, right? Because I can easily say, listen, I don't need these people in my life. I'm out. Peace later. Good luck with your lives, whatever. But for me, it's always, I'm removing a part that I spend so much time developing, you know? And I know that I don't have to, but I do it because I like to, I'm very introspective, right? So I go and introspect what happened in the situation, what could have been done better, what could have been done worse, because I don't want to make the same mistakes again, right? But also I want to learn from the mistakes that I've made, and also not defense mechanism, but not try and impose the same things that happened to me or that I've done on one person to the next person, because there's that empathy side, right? If I made a mistake on one person, I don't want to carry that mistake to other people, so I must correct the behavior that was incorrect, right? So when I leave social circles, it's a lot of introspection before I forgive myself enough to leave. You know, I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense to you.
And um, is it a destructive
So look,
way of dealing with it?
it can be looked at as destructive, but for me, it's always a thing of
Maybe taxing.
it's
Draining,
it's
taxing.
very emotionally draining. I can tell you that now. It can take up an emotional space of a day, 2 days, 3 days, a week, right?
Yeah.
But I know that I'm doing it to myself. The reason why I'm doing it to myself is because, as I said, I'm very introspective. It's not some sort of masochistic play, but it's more of a thing of why did it happen? Did I let it happen? Were the mistakes mine? Was it my fault? You know, it's a lot of questions that I ask myself, and there's a lot of things that obviously there's insecurities and things like that, but it's more of a thing of could it have been avoided? You know? And did I have to let go of something that I actually, because remember, we're at the stage now where everything that we have in our life is something that we enjoy. So if we end up leaving something now, it's going to take a huge amount of potential energy to leave it, right?
Yeah, it's not a quick decision.
If it was in the past where we had to leave our group of 20 friends and 5 of them you didn't want to speak to them anymore, I mean, really, does it make that much of a difference to you, right? But if you're in a state now where you've got like 13 people that you know total or that you want to speak to, like 13 in your whole life, right? If there's anybody outside of that 13 people, the conversation is going to be really pointless anyway, right? So imagine if you had to leave 2 of them out, right? These are the 13 people that you rely on for everything, right? If you had to now leave 2 of those people out, all of a sudden you understanding that your potential energy to leave those people behind, right, is going to have to be very high because your tolerance of leaving them behind now says that you don't have 2 more people that you used to rely on quite a lot to not rely on anymore, right? Because now it becomes a thing of I have people in my life because I rely on them and they rely on me, if you know what I'm saying. So it gets to a point now where if I have to leave something behind, it really, really has to mean like staying with them is the worst of 2 evils,
Yeah,
you know?
I was about to say.
Yeah. So it just becomes to that point of view. But I mean, it depends on the stage of life that you're in. If you're in a frat and or a college group and you're leaving like one circle of friends to go be with another circle of friends and you don't want to be with the other circle of friends, I mean, right? You still got so many different relationships that you're going to develop over your lifetime. So it really is a different scenario. But your question is very important because it's all about potential energy for leaving, right? You have to understand that if I'm going to leave these people or leave this group or stay away from these people, it's because it means more to me and my personal sanity to leave them behind and be myself. Yes. I don't know if that answers your question.
I agree. No, I agree. Sorry, I was on mute there for a moment.
This guy is talking to himself.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I know. I mean, in all of our lives, saying goodbye is difficult.
Yeah.
But it's like you're saying, if you value you more than anything else, and this something does not belong in your life anymore, you should always value you over anything else.
Yeah,
you know, it's just like how Dean mentioned before, it's self-respect as well. And you realize that, I mean, we outgrow things as well. We don't
That's
always
true,
stay the
we do.
same. You know, you can't expect people to stay the same as well. People change in their lives, they go through things, they grow through things, and people sometimes drift apart as well. It's not like there's going to be like a difference of opinions or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just you grow in one direction and this other person grows in the other direction, and you know, we can't fault them for that. You know, it leads back to what I just said in the beginning. It's like people just grow and grow in different directions, and that's beautiful. That's wonderful.
It should be celebrated.
Yes.
But
Not criticized.
Dean's take on it is a bit different from mine, I think.
So how do you deal with saying goodbye to people who don't belong, Dean?
Okay, when I was a lot younger, I was much more abrasive, and I think Prashant saw me do this to people, and I was like, I was I was a bit of a dick. But if you're going to violate the trust I've given you, then you're going to get very little leeway from me, and that's it. And I'd rather walk away.
So what you said there now, that's that trust, right? It's a betrayal of a core value.
Yes.
Okay.
it's that's the thing, is like if you break trust, then, or if it's very clear that I've misjudged you as a person, and you're not, someone of integrity, someone that is here for the right reasons, and you're just looking to either toy with people's emotions, you're a narcissist, or you're looking to just milk people and not give anything back or not contribute back into things, then I don't really have any time for you. And if I misjudge that, then that's on me, and I'm sorry, but you can move along now. Or if you've done something to break my trust, then go play in traffic, was my general response to things, right?
Okay,
I have
so
since grown up quite a lot
trust,
since
right?
then.
Like, are there any other situations or values?
That would cause me to walk away from someone.
Yes. Besides trust.
You see, no, that's the thing. Like walking away versus spending less time, I think, is an important distinction. Because if I'm allocating time to you, it means you're important to me, and because I've grown to realize that my time actually is important, because there's things that I want to do with my life. I've got ambitions, I've got goals, I've got targets that I need to meet. So if I'm giving time to you in whatever capacity, be it social, professional, or otherwise, romantic even, it means that you're important to me. And if I start scaling that time back, it means that you're no longer holding that same importance in my life. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily a bad person. It just means that, where I'm going and where you're going is not the same place. Like we're growing in two different directions, to the earlier point you made.
I think that's very
Okay, so sorry, before I interrupted you, so you said you were abrasive before. And
Yeah,
now-
I've grown up a lot since then, because I've had to, like, I was very defensive growing up. I was very self-sufficient as well, in many ways. Like I didn't trust people. Like I had very poor trust across the board, and it's because that was drummed into me from a young age. Like you can't trust anyone, because one day someone's going to let you down, and then you're going to be stuck. And then someone did let me down, and I was stuck. And guess what? I didn't die, which was wonderful. I carried on living and shit. And I know for some people, they, like the consequences are very severe, right? And there's a lot of privilege coming from, I need to state this. I've lived a very privileged life. And there's a lot of privilege coming from where I'm speaking, because, I had a lot of safety nets, in the sense that, like because I didn't die, there were things that could have saved me along the way. Can't think of an exact example right now, but at the end of the day, I've learned that if someone breaks your trust, it's really not the end of the world. You feel shitty about it. Yes, you're going to feel cuck, but you learn not to trust that person. And then you look at that person, and you look at the behavior they exhibited, and were there signs? Yes, there were. Okay, then I should have picked up on them. If there weren't any signs, then you know what? Maybe I misjudged the situation in a different way. And then you take that forward into the next sort of, friendships you make, and you learn to evaluate people and how you give them trust a bit better, and where those boundaries are, I suppose.
Yeah. It also, I like how Dean looks at it now, because it's a thing of my core values are my core values, and if you break my core values, then obviously I can't trust you anymore, right? So
Yeah.
I like that. I like that you give people the benefit of the doubt, and then if they break it, then it's over, right?
Yeah.
You give them the
Like one of the
benefit
most
doubt
empowering
first.
things you can ever, one of the most empowering things you can learn is that you can be hurt and you can get through that.
Yeah,
So it's like if you allow yourself to be hurt, and like full well that you'll survive, then you know what, you can learn to trust people.
it's nice. It's nice to. I like that way that you think. It's very strong, because you don't have a fear of, if someone does like impact you. You look, it happens, but you can get over it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that, because a lot of people out there don't think like that. They're like, if this person ever hurts me, that is it. I'm going to crumble, fall, and break, and that's it.
Yeah, but there's a
Also a
song, "I
fear
Will
of-
Survive." So
Yes,
you will
also a
survive.
fear of
Being alone.
yes, I was about to say that. Like one of you guys brought that up earlier in in the same podcast. Fear of being alone. So you'll tolerate, um,
Nonsense.
inconsistencies. Yes,
Tolerate
inconsistencies. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's just call apples apples, right? Terrible things,
Yeah.
for the fear of failure, and not cutting these people off.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something better for you out there, but you're just not seeing it because you're blocked by consistently associating with these types of people.
Yeah.
That's quite cool. Okay, so knowing all these things that we know now, and giving advice to anyone who is either in their formative years or latter or wherever they are in their lives, really, would you think it's a like when do you think it's a good idea for them to start practicing? I'm going to use a term from Les Brown here, where he says only quality people.
Yeah. What's it?
He says only quality
OQP
people.
or something.
OQP,
Yeah.
yeah. He says only quality people in your life.
Yeah.
So when do you think is a good time for people to start practicing OQP in their
I
lives?
don't know if there's a specific age, right? Because I don't know. I had this conversation with someone I used to work with when I first started working, and we both agreed on this. There's an
Yeah.
age bracket when you hit like 27, right? I don't know, but I've always noticed this. The minute you hit like 27, all of a sudden your social groups just change, right? You automatically start taking less of people's shit, right? You hit a certain age, whether it's 27 or 30 or whatever it is, and all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, I don't need to deal with this shit no more, right? And after that, it's like that's where that concept of OQP comes in, right? I only want to deal with the people that are on the same wavelength as me, right? And people you reach it at different ages, but it's sort of a thing where you can't really practice it. But okay, look, people have been learning to practice it, but it only becomes innate when you just wake up one morning. It's like, I am not dealing with your nonsense no more. If you start the shit, I'm gonna kick your ass and I'm gonna leave, right? And it happens. I mean, like I woke up one day,
Such
I think
fierce
it was
violence
around the
against
age
it.
of 27, and I just woke up and I was like, if I have to deal with this nonsense again, I'm leaving, right? And
Right.
it just comes down to it where you just like wake up. So when it comes to I think where you say the formative years, I think what people need to learn, and in your formative years, you aren't really that self-aware, but what you need to learn is other people around you. It's very difficult to say other people around you benefiting you, because then people start to really be stingy about who they spend their time with, right? Because it also curbs learning, right? But
Yeah.
it's also a thing of, listen, if there are toxic people around you and truly understand what toxicity is, don't just call people toxic because you don't agree with what they say, right?
Toxic bunny.
But if yeah, if people are if people are actually toxic around you, right? Those are the people that you don't want to spend time with. Those are not the quality people. Those are the quantity people, right? The
Yeah.
quality people are the one that you want, that embrace your positivity. That's what you want.
Yeah. If I could add to that, I think when you're younger, you've got capacity and you're in a space where you've got to be. It's almost like rapid prototyping.
Yeah.
You got to come across a lot of stuff and you got to learn a lot of stuff. And even the toxic people have a role to play in your life because they teach you what to look out for in your later years, right? And I mean, it's all like. I mean, like your formative years are high school, but it's also high school for life. Like you learn a lot of skills and you pick up things because once you get older, like Prashant talks about that age of 27, as you were saying that, I was like, do we have like a capacity or a threshold for the amount of stuff going on in our life? And as soon as we cross that threshold
Yeah.
of busyness, then we don't have time for nonsense. And it happens for a lot of us at 27 because at 27, we've been working for a few years, we've got some money, we're paying off a car. Some of us are starting to buy houses. There's a lot of bills. We're trying to deal with tax. We're trying to deal with the government. We're trying to deal with a whole lot of things that we never have to think about before. So now your intellectual capacity and your energy is fragmented in so many different directions that you literally do not have the energy for that shit.
Yeah.
And therefore you start cutting it out. But when you're in your teenage years, you got loads of energy, you got boatloads of the stuff. You don't think about tax, you don't think about the price of petrol or any of that nonsense. You think about what anime you're gonna watch and what girl you like.
It's actually, when you say it like that, right? I think it actually comes down to something that you left off the list, but is important, right? Is when you want to start settling down and having a family.
Ooh,
Right.
yes.
So that's where the actual breaking point comes in. Because when you're ready to now, it's literally that point, right? When you like, shit, okay, it's time for me to actually, okay, look, not everybody does this, but like Indian communities are like this, right? By the time you hit 27, you must start having
You're
kids, right?
hardwired.
Right.
Yeah. It's
So
like,
when you hit that age group, right, all of a sudden your time for shit is over, not because, and I understand what you mean by your boss, your job, this is so many years, tax and everything, but it's because of the fact that you need to now gear yourself to have a different social life going forward. And if you can gear yourself to having that family life,
It's
all
very
of a
true.
sudden,
Very true.
all that other nonsense of going to clubs, all that other crap just falls away, right? And that is that mental shift and change. And you'll see that when people automatically, have you noticed that every person that's gotten into a relationship that actually took them through marriage and children, right? There was a point where they met that person and their entire life to you changed. Do you notice that
There are
in
people like
every
that.
person
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you know that's gotten married and stuff like that, or every person that we know that's gotten married and has kids, right? There was a point where they were your best mate and they were doing all the shit that you were doing, and then there was a day where they weren't, right? And then they became married and had kids, right? It's that shift. That's the point where it changes. And I didn't realize it until you said it now, right? Look at every person that you know. There's a lifestyle shift. It's literally a lifestyle change that causes the change in where that Yash is talking about at the when you can start uh, changing your social groups. It's a lifestyle change. It may not be
It's
marriage,
when we actually become
yeah,
adults in a way.
but it may not be marriage, right? It may be the fact where you decide to have a lifestyle change. If I want to change my lifestyle, right? It's also the people that the fat people that want to go to the gym and lose all their weight. They start cutting off their friends that go to the pizza joint all the time,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
It's when I want to make a lifestyle change, right? That is when your social groups change. Because your social groups, as you say, only quality people, right? You only hang out with the people that are going to be in your forward thinking direction.
Yes.
And that is where it comes from.
It's deciding, like you're talking about lifestyle, but it's also deciding who you as a person want to be.
Yeah.
So those people that
Yeah.
are like, I want to be a father, I want to be a
Yeah.
husband, I want to have a family,
Yeah.
or I want to be fit as hell, wear the nicest clothes,
Yeah.
look super slick, and I want to feel good about myself. It's when you decide this is the person I am
Yes.
or I'm going to be, and you work towards that.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, around that 27, 28, 29, those years is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, around the time when a person's Saturn return occurs. And for those of you who don't know, it's an astrology term. It's when the universe recognizes you as an adult. It's because it's the time that it takes Saturn to go around the sun one full rotation since your birth.
Oh.
And I think because it's like an oval, not a circle, it can be like between 27 and 29, I think. Not
Okay.
100% sure.
I
But
did
I'll
not
check.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Weird bit of coincidence there for you.
I don't think it's coincidence.
Anyway, back to the
But
conversation.
but does it have to happen at that stage though? I'm
No.
just saying, like,
No.
No, it doesn't. I mean, you could decide at 21, this is who I am, and
even
you
even
could,
younger than that, by the way.
yeah, like, and you
So
could
we're not
just
limiting
make,
ages here. Age
yes,
groups
yeah.
here.
I mean, you could decide at 12, this is who I am, and make those changes.
Yeah.
There's nothing to say, it's fixed to a particular age. It's just at that particular age, because there's so much activity in your social circle about change and about growing up and about settling down. That's kind of how we start taking on those properties. I mean, at the very beginning of this conversation, we talked about you take on the properties of your social environment. If your whole social environment is getting married and popping out babies, then you start taking on those properties.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think though, if we were talking about it innately within the person, if I had to say when would that change occur? That change occurs if you as a person make a definitive change that I want to change my lifestyle into this direction. All of a sudden, you'll notice that your social circles change. It will change based on the direction you take your life in. It has nothing. I agree that the whole marriage stuff, I think that is a definite change point in your life, but it can happen at 23, right?
Yes, it can.
But
Absolutely.
it stems from the fact that the person as themselves decided that my life is going to go from this direction to this direction, and it's not only in a holistic life point of view, it's in every aspect of life. If you decide that I don't want to smoke cigarettes anymore, you'll naturally gravitate away from all the people that smoke, right? If you decide that you don't want to go to clubs anymore, all your friends that go to clubs are not going to be your friends anymore, because when they are out on Saturday night, you are at the movies.
Yeah.
So it's basically the changes happen when anybody makes a definitive change in the four aspects of their life: friends, family, health, self, and spirituality slash religion.
If I can preface that, I think it occurs slightly before then.
Yeah.
As in, like the true change happens when you change what you need.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure,
and it's like
for sure.
the need to fit into a particular group takes a back seat
Yeah,
to the need for whatever my identity is going forward.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. That's it. I think that word is identity. So it's a change in the self,
Yes,
uh,
that's it.
the change in the self identification of what that person sees themselves as.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would clearly define the answer to Yash's question.
But also it actually brings us to a point where we kind of understand how a person gets to choose and evolve in a group and evolve their group or be part of a group or not be part of a group
Yeah.
because of what you just said now,
Mm.
because it culminates to that point where you now identify who you are holistically.
Yeah, literally, it's literally that self identification that it comes down to. Um,
Yeah.
I think Dean like summarized it quite well. Oh yeah, summarized it quite well as well.
Mm.
Teamwork.
With
Of
that.
course. I mean, that's what we're here for. So do any of you have any I guess any comments about any further comments about social circles that you'd like to make, or any different dynamics that you can think of further
Don't
that we didn't actually
I
touch
would
on?
say always don't be afraid to voice your opinion in a group, but have it measured. So think about what it is that it means to you, and don't be afraid to voice your opinion. And if people don't agree with it and they shun you for it, don't spend time with those people.
Exactly.
But if they're willing to listen to your opinion and take it into their stride, then those are people that you may want to spend time with because they're understanding of who you are.
Yeah. And like acceptance is important, but also like if you say something and people don't agree with it, but are willing to at least see your perspective, there's still that's still people you want to spend time with because they're people that'll help you grow. They're emotionally mature. They've got some emotional intelligence about them, and that's in short supply these days. Maybe it was always in short supply. Who knows? But it's very important to have people like that around you, and to just bring back to something that we talked about earlier on, is that don't be afraid of starting over, because
Yeah.
this is literally the best time in mankind's history to ever go in search of your tribe. You can find them anywhere. I mean, we've got friends. There's a friend of ours, Sashin, living in Canada, became a vegan, moved to Canada, living his best life, climbing mountains and stuff. But he's found his people, and they were all the way in Canada. And it's not to say that we weren't his people. We just, we weren't 100% reflective of everything he wants to talk about on a daily basis. But those people are. And we live in a time where you can find your tribe anywhere in the world. You're not going to be alone. You just have to go out and look. That's it.
It's so important what you say there, because people always feel like if I leave this group, I'm going to be alone. And I think they should take comfort in the fact that your tribe is out there somewhere. There are so many people on this planet. You're telling me that not 10 people on this planet like the same things that you do, right? In exactly the same way you like them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, don't be that naive. I mean, there's so many people on the planet, like you're saying. I mean, what are the odds? Statistically, someone has to enjoy the same things you enjoy.
Yeah.
And here's another thing, right? If you're afraid of being alone, that's another warning sign. You should look at that. Like, you should examine that about yourself, because you must be comfortable spending time with yourself before you start getting comfortable spending time with others.
That's a big one.
I think that's a big one as well. Yeah, I agree.
Because it changes the way you view your social circles.
It does, but I mean, spending time with yourself also means that if you don't look at yourself in a particularly kind light, you need to examine why. Like, there are some people that are very harsh to themselves, and maybe there's something that occurred in your life that has caused you to completely throw away your self value, and that happens to people, and it's very unfortunate. But it's not to say that that's who you are. You must look at that, understand why, and try and build yourself up again. Because until you learn to respect yourself, it's going to be difficult for others to respect you. It's not to say you won't get respected. Some people will, because they're decent human beings. But for the most part, you need to have a healthy respect for yourself and a healthy self-love. aspect to it as well, because that's how you are able to then set boundaries so that you aren't run over by people. And you can look after yourself in a social circle, and then you're not dependent on a social circle
Or
out of
overpowered.
obligation. Yes, you're then choosing dependency, not forced into dependency,
Yeah.
and that's a huge distinction.
I agree.
All right, guys. Well, that was quite an interesting discussion, I guess, that we've had. We've covered a fair amount about social circles
And the impact thereof.
and the impact that they have on your life, and how you can navigate your way through it.
Yeah, I mean, we did speak a lot about how the different aspects of social circles can negatively impact you, but there's also lots of different positive ones. I mean,
No, definitely that as well.
I mean,
I think
simply put, your positive aspects are your social circles, and having good social circles can, as Yash says, that OQP is if you pick people that you know around you that will improve the way you see your life and the way you value your life, that will naturally improve the way you live your life, and you'll be happier for it.
Yeah.
correct. I mean, there's that saying by Dan Pena,
And
and he says, "Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future."
yeah, that guy's rough though, eh?
He is really, really hardcore. So some people might associate with him because he's a billionaire and things like that and want to be like him. But he's very old school billionaire in terms like he's a very like a man's man type of person. But anyway, it leads to what Prash just mentioned, where there's good aspects to it as well. Like you can learn and adapt from each other. Gain different understandings, perspectives, like Dean mentioned. Help grow yourself
like
through
your friend,
interactions
like
with
those
others.
people support you a lot. Like relying, like choosing to rely on them for support. Your life becomes so much easier, more comfortable. There's a lot more strength and energy that you have when you know that there are people that have your back. Like you find that you can just plow through life at a ridiculous pace.
Yeah.
Look, that's one thing I always had about. I was always not afraid of, because I learned it from somewhere. It was always I don't know whether I learned it while I was studying, but it was always you should never be afraid to ask, and I applied that to every aspect of my life. So I just became this person that asked for everything. I asked for friends, I asked for help from friends, and then all of a sudden it came into a thing where, because I had asked for help from people, right, I noticed them as my friends. All of a sudden I was leaning on people, whether I knew I could trust them or not. What happens is that some of them fall away, and the ones that stick, right, or the ones that you can actually lean on, because you go and ask. I was one of the people that go and ask everything, right? I'll go and ask everybody everything, right? I still do it nowadays.
I remember how Prash and I first met in the library.
But I don't know if Dean knows that story, but I still do that now. If there's something that I don't understand, or there's something that I need help with, I don't even care if the person that I'm asking doesn't know, right? I will ask them anyway, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a thing for me of, I would rather find out, right, than not know, than worry about whether that person thinks I should know the answer or not.
Yeah.
Right. And that's it. Like, I met Yash because I didn't understand something, and I was literally walking around the library at 11 o'clock in the night, because I was like, I don't understand how to answer this thing. If I don't learn how to answer it, I'm going to fail, right? And then I was like, okay, let me go, because there must be some other idiot in this entire library that I was studying. I was studying for a course, right? And I was like, there must be some other guy in this entire library that's studying the same thing as me, because we were at campus, so naturally there'd be people studying, right? So I just went around, and then I saw these people looking at these huge maps that I had in my hand as well, because we had these huge Macros plots and whatever, right? And then I saw it, and then I was like, oh, okay, there's people here that are studying the same thing. Let me ask them if they know. Now, I didn't know my asshole from my elbow whether they knew more than me or less than me, right? But I asked them, and needless to say, they didn't know anything, right? But but we figured it out together.
And that is life, ladies and gentlemen.
No, we figured it out together. Honestly, in that night,
in that 2-hour stretch between then and when the library closed, we figured it out while we were sitting there, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I met Yash, because Yash was one of those people.
But how reflective of that is life?
But
Like,
Dean,
you meet people that you don't really know what you're doing, but you figure shit out
but
together.
Dean, you never believe it was Yash and one other person sitting there, and the only
Was
other
it
person
Bradley?
sitting there was Bradley, right?
I knew it was
And when I
Bradley.
moved up,
It was Bradley.
but you wouldn't
Myself and
believe what
Brad.
happened was when I moved up to Joburg for the first time, I had nothing, right? I had absolutely nothing in my hands, right? I had a bag with clothes and I had a backpack with a laptop in it, and I stayed. The only person that let me stay with them was Bradley. If I didn't walk around in the library that day, I would have never had anybody to stay with when I moved up to Joburg. And I never would have met the friends that I met because I met Rov, right? You came and stayed with us. So
I did,
it
yeah.
turned from me walking around in the library, right, to literally, I mean, how many people did we meet from there? You knew Sashin, but Lee didn't know anybody. Lee met Sashin, but we met each other because we all played games, right? Then uh, you, all of them met Lynn because I think I met Lynn in one of our classes, right? And then we all formed this huge group, and it was all because I didn't understand the answer to a question, and all I did was, I don't know the answer, I'm going to ask.
And you formed a social circle because you asked
But
a
it's that
question.
mentality.
How amazing is
If you
that?
don't know something, right, the only thing that you need to do is decide whether you want to know the answer. And if you want to know the answer, literally just go and ask anybody until you get it, because there'll be somebody that'll answer your question.
That's true.
And
Very
yeah,
true.
you can literally build lifelong friendships on that. And I have proof.
Yeah. We have references. We have references.
Right, yeah.
So it really, I mean, we wouldn't even have this podcast if I didn't do that, right?
No, that's true. There are reasons for everything.
But it's not like I need
The
to take
universe
credit
works
for
in
it,
mysterious
because
ways.
if it's how it works dependency wise, right?
Yeah.
It's how, if we wouldn't have this podcast if Yash didn't want to have a podcast. So it's his self growth and self determination to do something that's led us to this point, right? So you
Yeah.
see how my self growth in the beginning, right, led to another person's self growth in a different scenario where we end up in a completely different scenario, right? But it's
Yeah.
based on your it's
Yeah.
based on your social circle. So you see what great things can happen from social circles, right?
And what we and that shows growth as well, by the way. It had massive growth and
Yeah.
massive forward movement
Yeah.
to from what we were then to what we are now.
Like if
Yeah.
I didn't meet Dean, I'll tell you now, I would be a completely different person, right? I would be a completely different person from who I am now. I'd be sheltered. I'd be more anxious. I'd be, not to say that Dean recognized these things and told me about them, but my interactions with Dean taught me so much about myself, right? That I improved myself because he and I interacted. Not Dean was different and I was different back then, but because of our interactions, we both grew each other,
Yeah.
right?
I agree with that. And I felt the same.
I would have been a completely
Definitely.
different person, but it's because of the nature of who you are, and you must essentially. I would say, when it comes to social circles, if you don't understand something, ask the people that are in your social circle, and if they can't give you
Also,
if they can't give you the answer, then OQP is not the place, right?
but also you have to be open.
Yes.
You have to be an open energy, an open person to different ideas, different perspectives,
Yeah.
Yes, that's very
to
true.
also grow yourself internally as well.
Yeah.
You can't be a closed-minded person.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, shame, because there are a lot of closed-minded people out there.
No, and fine, but they need to understand that if they're going to grow internally
Yeah.
by interacting with people with different perspectives, then they need to be open to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but remember, closed-mindedness comes from a need for security. Whereas with us, we find it dangerous to stagnate, and therefore we are open.
Yeah, I
Whereas
mean, we should always be moving. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah,
like for us,
yeah.
there's more of a risk to stagnate than there is of to go outside, learn something, and if you get hurt, you get hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas other people, there's too much of a fear of getting hurt. Like they need security, and therefore the closed-mindedness
Yeah.
is ever present.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think social circles can really do wonders for people if they use it the right way.
They really can.
Yeah.
It has its benefits.
Absolutely.
Like we've just mentioned, support groups, growth,
Yeah, friends helping you dress better,
Yeah, well, that's still
You know,
none of you all ever want to come shopping with me, but that's
well,
okay.
firstly,
We're in a pandemic,
you've
Yash.
only ever asked me after we started the pandemic, okay? But
I did
but
actually,
you know
yeah, that's
what?
true.
Even my dad used to tell me, listen, because he used to see like his boss's boss and stuff like that. They used to go play golf, right?
Yeah,
And it's sort of the same thing, you know. If you like you want to dress dapper and you want to dress like a certain way and stuff like that, it's you creating you know, like biker gangs have their symbol and their emblem, right? You know,
sure, yeah,
social groups also have their symbol and their emblem, right?
right,
And
yeah,
like you want to create that environment for yourself. And Yash has this thing where he wants everyone to dress according to the weather and the style, right? And
but
Season,
for
apparently.
me, wanting y'all to do that is more
Autumn
about
fashion is a
your
thing.
confidence, really, your self confidence.
but you
I
see,
want that
Yash,
to grow
but
from
you see
inside.
what
Yeah,
happens is that it's because it's given.
I don't want you to be like
No, no,
me.
no, 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 no. It's not that. It's not
possible.
that. It's given you self confidence to do that, right?
Yeah,
Because you've labeled it as it's a way for me to get self confident, right? Because I want
yeah,
to look a certain way and I want to dress a certain way. But what you're
yeah,
doing is that you're imprinting your uh your label,
Method.
right, or your
Method.
your method, right, onto the group. And it's not to say that it's a bad thing or you making the group yours or whatever. It's you're trying to share your confidence with others, right? And if you can do that within your social circle and your social circle is accepting of that, look how strong it makes your mentality,
well, I didn't think about it that way.
right?
All I thought about was I just want y'all to to have open minds about how you'll dress yourselves in
But
public.
it's
That's pretty
because
much it. It's not.
you've experienced it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
why,
yeah.
right? So it's that thing. And my dad used to say, listen, they go and play golf, and they never used to play golf because they played golf. They played golf because it gave them a chance to network, right?
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
100%
it's
that.
the
Yeah,
same concept. You're applying a certain thing because it allows the group to get confidence, right? And with them,
yeah.
they wanted the group to gain more money, right?
Hmm.
And it's because that's how groups operate. And everybody
Yeah,
has their own input to it, and everybody grows the group in a different way. But if you all work together, right, and you all follow everybody else's ideas, imagine how strong your group of friends can be.
yeah.
And
True.
that's why Les Brown says OQP.
Hmm. Brother Les Brown.
Les Brown. Yeah, that guy is strong. That guy's power.
He
Yeah,
is. Yeah,
that's
and I
Yeah.
think and someone else I like listening to as well is Reverend T.D. Jakes.
yeah, yeah,
T.D. Jakes
yeah,
has some
yeah,
powerful
yeah.
words, and so I go to different people for different things,
Yeah.
right? So there's Gaur Gopal Das
Oh,
for
I love that guy. I
just for like the
absolutely
Yeah.
love that
simplicity
guy.
of
Mm,
understandings. There's Dandapani for like the higher level
yeah.
understandings because he
Dandapani is
takes
good
things to
stuff.
another level.
Mm,
Yep.
There's Les Brown, and then there's Reverend T.D. Jakes for when I need some
yeah.
powerful stuff to get me out of certain situations. And then there's one more person I can't remember.
Gary
Oh
Vee.
yes, there's Jim Rohn.
Jim Rohn.
Jim Rohn for I guess for personal growth. That's what I
Okay.
use Jim Rohn for.
One of my
So there's a lot of different sources.
one of my favorite guys is Charles Bukowski.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, he's a classic.
He's literally my favorite. Like anything I read of his is just like, this guy.
To you listeners, thank you so much for listening in to our rambles at times, and we hope you gain some value that you can use in your life. So, this is your Bro Code signing off. Have a powerful day. Until next time, cheers.